Trump's statements have become some of his sharpest public remarks on this topic during his presidential campaign. What US intelligence is saying about granting Ukraine permission to strike Russian territory? What does the change in Putin's nuclear doctrine mean? I'm Drutska and I will share some amusing news from the Russian swamps. You definitely want to stay tuned until the end. During a campaign event in North Carolina, former US President Donald Trump made pointed comments regarding Russia's war against Ukraine and President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump's remarks were among his most cutting public statements on this subject in the context of the election campaign. According to Bloomberg, Trump was displeased with two events involving Zelensky that took place in the US. He stated, "The president of Ukraine is in our country. He is making dirty little attacks against your favorite president, me. And we continue to provide billions of dollars to a person who refused to make a deal, Zelensky." However, Trump did not clarify what he meant. If he meant making a deal where we give up 25% of our territory to Putin, then it seems he should think of any better ideas. Trump said that after 3 years of terrible fighting, Ukraine is absolutely demolished.
And we continue to give billions of dollars to a man who refuses to make a deal.
And millions of people are dead. He also claimed that all 1,000-year-old cities, except for Kyiv, have been destroyed. Those incredible buildings with golden towers are gone. You will never see such a city or town again. They will never be rebuilt. They are all destroyed, except for Kyiv. You will never be able to restore the cities and towns as they were. They were thousands of years old. Just think about it, he said. 3 years ago, you had a wonderful civilization. Millions of people lived here who are no longer with us, said Trump. Where this nostalgia for golden dooms comes from is unclear. It's a pity you don't know the very famous Soviet song, Criminal Russian Chanson, about golden dooms. In this song, the protagonist asks a tattoo artist to ink certain symbols, domes, and that reflects elements of his biography related to his time in prison. Well, Russian chanson is a separate topic. I'm not an expert in prison songs, but for some reason it came to my mind after Trump mentioned the golden domes, presumably referring to church and cathedral roofs. Well, he certainly has a remarkable and profound understanding of Ukraine. It's so impressive, to say the least. Then he stated that most of the country is gone and later claimed that Ukraine as such no longer exists. There is no Ukraine. Trump stated that it would take hundreds of years to rebuild what has been destroyed in Ukraine and added that it would be impossible to restore the country. There won't be enough money to rebuild it, even if the whole world comes together, he said. He claimed that if Kamala Harris wins the elections, even more people will die and more cities will fall. Well, it's quite a grim outlook. However, it's also disheartening that your President Biden has not granted Ukraine permission to strike Russian airfields. There are rumors that we need to wait for the elections because every vote is crucial for the Democrats and they don't want to risk granting permission now. Therefore, I really hope that after the elections, Biden will finally give that approval. Well, let me know in comments what do you think about this. And regarding, by the way, the permission for Ukraine after the elections. By the way, I will talk about the topic of long-range strikes now. But before I continue, I want to thank all of you who sent coffees on Buy Me a Coffee and become Patreon, please do so if you want more videos on the channel. You can also help this channel by subscribing to it and like this video, as it will definitely help Ukrainian content to be seen by more people. I suggest you also subscribe to my X page, where I post regular updates about the situation in Ukraine, and to my Instagram, where I show the daily life in Ukraine. American intelligence believes that Russia will respond with greater force against the US and its coalition partners if they agree to grant Ukraine permission to strike deep into Russia with Western weapons. The New York Times reports, citing sources, that intelligence analysts view the approval for strikes as a potential risk with uncertain benefits. Possible responses from Russia include an increase in arson and sabotage at facilities in Europe, and potentially deadly attacks on American and European military bases. American officials believe that sabotage is more likely response, as GRU is responsible for most acts of sabotage in Europe that have occurred so far. The intelligence assessment notes that such approval is unlikely to significantly impact the course of the war. Moreover, after the first strike, they say the Russians will relocate ammunition depots, command posts, combat helicopters, and other vital battlefield assets beyond the reach of missiles. Critics of Biden and his advisors argue that they are too easily intimidated by Putin's aggressive rhetorics, claiming that the administration's gradual approach to arming Ukrainians has put them at a disadvantage on the battlefield. Supporters of the Biden administration's approach contend that it has been successful in preventing a violent Russian response. The New York Times notes that Britain is less fearful of a Russian response. In particular, the country's leaders have expressed support for allowing us, Ukrainians, to use Western long-range missiles, but are awaiting Biden's decision on the matter, as a potential response from Moscow could have implications for the security of allies as a whole. The benefits of allowing Ukraine to use Western-provided weapons for strikes deep into Russia may outweigh the risk of Russian retaliation more than Western politicians are currently considering, according to a new report from American Institute for the Study of War. The Institute analyzed the reports from this New York Times that I mentioned earlier. The Kremlin has conducted covert operations against Western states long before the current debates on Ukraine's use of Western-provided weapons to strike Russia, and it may plan to escalate these operations regardless of West's decision, as these operations support other Kremlin goals of destabilizing European countries and undermining NATO's military readiness, the report states. Analysts know that even a small number of successful long-range Ukrainian strikes could prompt Russian forces to relocate significant military and storage facilities beyond the reach of Western-provided weaponry and further away from the front lines, complicating Russia's logistics near Ukraine. According to ISW, Russian President Vladimir Putin has recently revived his most effective narratives in the Western and Russian information spaces, which have already prompted the West to exercise self-restraint and delayed security assistance to Ukraine at critical moments in 2022 and 2024. Analysts said that Putin has adapted these narratives to specifically target the current debates in the West regarding granting us permission to strike deep into Russia. On September 26, the Kremlin stated that changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine announced the day before by Putin should be seen as signal to the West. This is a warning signal for these countries about the consequences if they participate in an attack on our country by various means, not necessarily nuclear, said Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. Russian President Putin stated on September 25th that there would be a nuclear response amid Kyiv's aspirations to obtain permission from the West to strike deep into Russia with Western weapons. In the updated version of the document, Russia's nuclear doctrine, aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear state, but with the involvement of support of a nuclear state, is proposed to be considered as their joint attack on the Russian Federation, he said. He also mentioned that Moscow would consider the possibility of using nuclear weapons upon receiving reliable information about a massive launch of airspace attack means, clarifying that this refers to strategic and tactical aircraft, cruise missiles, drones, hypersonic, and other flying vehicles. At the same time, the American Institute for the Study of War noted that analyzing Putin's statement shows he continued to threaten the possibility of nuclear confrontation between Russia and the West to enhance control over Western decision-making and impede the West from granting Ukraine permission to use long-range weapons to strike military targets in Russia. So let me know what do you think, guys? What does the change in Putin's nuclear doctrine mean? Will he really use nuclear weapons or just regular missiles, for example, against NATO countries? Let me know. Well, to wrap things up, let me entertain you with some news from the so-called Russia. You might think I made this up, but I assure you I didn't. Well, in the State Duma, they proposed banning the promotion of the child-free lifestyle. According to the deputies, banning the promotion of a conscious refusal to have children will help improve the birth rate. And of course, it needs improvement. Russia is dying at record rates, they say. For such thoughts, they want to introduce fines. Honestly, I'm not even sure the average Russian knows what child-free means, but that's not all. The head of the Federal Council Committee of Economic Policy stated that having children should be considered an individual achievement for women applying to higher education institution. Schoolgirls who give birth to at least one child will receive maximum extra points when applying to college. Giving birth within a year before submitting documents to a university should be considered a personal achievement, and these additional points will help women get an education without harming demographics, according to Senator Kutyepe. I wonder if this member of the Federal Council realized that the majority of applicants to higher education institutions are teenage girls who have just graduated from the high school. The parliamentarian suggests they have children at the age of 17, 18. Also, Deputy Sam Ryabtseva has already spoken about this earlier. How to pursue higher education while simultaneously raising a child doesn't seem to cross their mind. But that's not all of this topic. Russia is planning a massive education reform due to a severe labor shortage. According to President's assistant Vladimir Medinsky, 11 years in school is too long. The curriculum should be compressed so that students enter vocational training early and are competitive rather than starting to think about their future only at 19. So even better, after high school, they can actually go to vocational schools to learn to be, artilleryman, chef, or straight to produce missiles manufacture plant. Although that ideally you need to be an engineer for that, or no. Well, they can also join infantry and go straight to the war, and women, they can make some dumplings in the rear for soldiers and wars their socks. You think that's all? No. In Sakhalin, students were forced to watch real abortion videos to convince them of the necessity of having children. I can't show you the video here, but it's pretty graphic and terrible, showing the scrapping of a non-viable fetus up close. Reports say the video was part of a lecture stating that in case of an unplanned pregnancy, it's better to give a birth and that abortion can lead to death. Interesting that they don't tell kids that invading another country can also lead to death, so they shouldn't do that either. What I can say, the family as a traditional value is in decline, replaced by some absurd mix of Soviet ideology and church teaching that failed to consolidate Russian society terribly. The Russian government's actions are only worsening the already deeply degraded sense of family in Russia. Well, keep it up. I hope to live to see the day when Russia falls apart. That's wrap up my Russophobic rants. I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine, watching Ukrainian content. Please do like this video, my little Russophobes, and if you really like it and you want more videos like this, you can support the channel's development on Patreon or buy me a coffee. See you soon, and Slava Ukraini! By the way, some of you asked what James Jr. has a new accessory, and this is a pretty cool patch I've got for him. Maybe one day when I launch another fundraise for humanitarian aid, I will auction it out for you guys.